You are listening to 600 Second Saga. Today's feature is Traveling Man by Eddie D. Moore. When Charles awoke, he slowly examined his surroundings to find, as he expected, he had no idea where he was. For the past 2 years, he had woken up in a different place and time every time he went to sleep. One day, he was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tool company, and the next morning, he woke up penniless, homeless, lost, and alone. He had decided months ago that the loneliness was the worst part of his new life. Once the disorientation from waking yet again in unknown surroundings passed, he began to walk about looking for something to eat. He found some berries that were not yet ripe, and some nuts that were just too bitter to swallow. He heard a distant hum that grew louder, then faded into the distance, which gave him hope. The majority of his days were spent alone, searching for food or a source of heat. He had learned the hard way that it was much better to be searching for food than trying to avoid being food. Dinosaurs were much more vicious than the movies portrayed them. Cautiously, he began walking toward the sound of civilization. He came up to a small town and immediately felt out of place. The cars that passed him had no windows, and every person he walked by had clothing with a slight metallic gleam. He caught a glimpse inside one of the cars as someone got out and saw a couple of video screens, some lightly illuminated electronics, and 2 leather seats. When its occupant stepped away from the car, the door closed and the car drove off with no one inside. He watched in awe as the car found its own parking space. The people looked away from him when they passed him on the street and refused to make eye contact. He had acquired these clothes in the 19th century, a simple white long-sleeve shirt, black trousers, and a well-made pair of boots. He always woke up in whatever clothing he went to sleep wearing. The first week had felt very awkward running around in nothing but his underwear. These clothes were acceptable in any time period, except this one, it seemed. He entered what appeared to be a small retro diner and took a seat. The waitress smiled as she came to his table, and he returned her smile. "Good morning, sugar. Now, how am I supposed to take your order with those clothes on?" Charles glanced at his arm. "What, should I take them off?" She smiled attractively, rolled her eyes, and went into the back room. When she came back, she had a black jacket with a familiar metallic shine. "Someone left this a few months ago. I think it should fit you close enough." He put it on, and after 5 seconds the waitress touched the jacket with her pad. "Oh my, you are hungry. A double helping of oatmeal, bananas, orange juice, and toast." Charles replied with amazement. "That actually sounds like what I want. How did you know?" "Everyone knows that the computers are very good at determining what our body needs, honey." The front door of the diner opened, and a man wearing a uniform with a triangular badge came inside. His eyes instantly fell on Charles, and he came to the table. "Good morning, Ellie. I have reports of a man walking in the streets without wearing the approved RID clothing, and your doorway reported an anomalous entry." "Now, George, you leave the man alone. He isn't causing any trouble, and he has on RID clothing now." Okay. The officer looked Charles over. "Don't draw my attention again, or you will spend the night behind bars." Charles stammered with some confusion. "Yes, officer. No problem." The officer left the diner, and Ellie brought Charles his food. He knew he had no way of paying for the food, and had planned on eating it, then letting them take him to jail. It made no difference to him. He just wanted a full stomach. He would wake up somewhere else tomorrow anyway. The waitress was so nice to him that it left him feeling guilty. "I'm sorry, but I have to admit that I have no way of paying for this food. I would be willing to work it off, though. She smiled and shook her head. You are an odd man, aren't you? No one has paid for food since they passed the RID Act. This may be a retro restaurant, but we aren't that retro. Charles spent the rest of the day with Ellie discussing how the RID Act had eliminated hunger and most crime. People were fed by the government in exchange for wearing the RID clothing. The computers used sensors in the clothing to determine each person's dietary needs and select their meals. The money saved in healthcare supposedly paid for the food. The clothing also tracked your movements in and out of doorways, making it easy for police to pick up anyone who violated a law. Charles felt a connection with Ellie that he had not felt in years, and he tried not to think of what tomorrow would bring. When the day came to an end, he found himself on Ellie's couch, holding her close. It felt great to have physical contact with another person. Her hair was soft and smelled faintly of the coconut shampoo she used. A fire snapped and popped, giving the room what dim light it could offer. Charles fought his heavy eyelids well into the night, but as always, eventually fatigue claimed him, and he fell asleep. This was Traveling Man by Eddie D. Moore, originally published in the Saturday Night Reader. Eddie D. Moore travels extensively for work, and he spends much of that time listening to audiobooks. The rest of the time is spent dreaming of stories to write, and he spends the weekends writing them. His stories have been published in Jouth Webzine, The Flash Fiction Press, Everyday Fiction, Theme of Absence, Devolution Z, and Fantasia Divinity Magazine. Find more on his blog, eddiedmore.wordpress.com. Check our show notes for links. Music is provided by Mads. Learn more about 600 Second Saga, our authors, how to submit your flash fiction, and how to support the podcast in the show notes. This has been Mariah Avix and 600 Second Saga.